Melbourne today is home to more than 5 million people, sustained by a world-class water system. But rewind to the 19th century, and things were very different. Early settlers relied on this river, the Birrarung, or Yarra River, for their drinking water, washing, and waste disposal. Over-reliance and mismanagement of this water source in the early years of development, however, would lead to major public health crises in these early decades of the city's founding. When the present-day city of Melbourne was established in 1835 by John Batman and John Pascoe Fawkner, the settlers likely saw the Birrarung as an abundant and endless water source. This would have been especially true for John Fawkner, who, as an 11-year-old boy, had witnessed the failed British settlement at Sullivan Bay on the Mornington Peninsula in late 1803. A lack of water and timber forced the abandonment of that early attempt at settlement in early 1804, prompting the party's relocation to Tasmania. Early Melbourne, beside the Birrarung by comparison, featured a natural rocky outcrop located at the site of the present-day Queen Street Bridge, which meant that the waters essentially upstream of the modern CBD were fresh and available most of the time to sustain the growing settlement. But there was one major flaw. As the settlement grew outwards and upstream of the CBD, everything from human waste to industrial runoff from abattoirs flowed straight into it, with little to no regard for the flow-on effects to the environment or others throughout the settlement. With no sewage or planned drainage system, a growing population, and an overutilisation of the waterway to receive human byproducts, Melbourne quickly earned a reputation by the late 19th century of Marvellous Melbourne, a play on its former title of Marvellous Melbourne, given by British journalist George Augustus Sala during his visit. During these early years, waste from homes and factories was often emptied directly into open drains, turning streets into disease-ridden channels. These polluted waters would then be washed into the Birrarung upstream of the CBD via creeks and streams, leaving many people taking water downstream towards its ports and factories at major risk of waterborne disease. By the 1850s, Melbourne's population had surged past 23,000 and was climbing fast. The result? Outbreaks of typhoid, dysentery, and cholera, killing thousands. This was driven by the ongoing dependence on the heavily polluted Birrarung. The city's leaders knew something had to change. Enter James Blackburn, a civil engineer from England, incarcerated and sent to Australia for the crime of forgery. After serving his sentence and making contributions to other settlements throughout Tasmania, he relocated his family to Melbourne. He already had exposure to the development of water supply systems in Tasmania, and the circumstances in Melbourne, with high mortality from disease, gave him a bold idea: diverting fresh, unpolluted water from far outside the city limits into a purpose-built supply system. His idea was groundbreaking for the city. Likely inspired by systems in use back in London, he developed a scheme to take water from the Plenty River, a tributary of the Birrarung, and pipe it to the CBD for distribution to the public, recouping its construction and operational costs via fee. But it wasn't until the gold rush of the 1850s, when Melbourne's population exploded, that the government realised that they needed more than just ideas. They needed action. Sadly for James Blackburn, his concept of the Plenty River scheme, its reservoir and distribution systems, would only be brought into use following his death in 1854 from typhoid, the very disease his concept was meant to help address. In 1857, Melbourne's first major water supply project was completed, the Yan Yean Reservoir, along with its aqueduct and transfer pipeline to Melbourne. It was Australia's largest engineered water supply at the time, holding over 30 gigalitres of water, and in the year of its opening, it was the largest water supply reservoir in the world. In the years prior to its widespread operation, the city utilised a 700,000 litre square iron water tower, which now resides at Melbourne's Western Treatment Plant. but was originally built at the corner of Albert and Gisborne Streets in East Melbourne. Initially, this iron tank received and held water pumped from the Birrarung, from a point where the river's waters had not yet turned brackish. With the Yan Yean scheme completed and operational, the tower was later integrated into the new water network. Over time, the tank was decommissioned and in 1892 relocated to its present-day home in the Western Treatment Plant. For the first time, Melbourne had a dedicated, largely protected water source. A gravity-fed aqueduct and pipeline carried clean water over 30 kilometres to the city. But Yan Yean wasn't perfect. The reservoir was shallower than others in use today across Melbourne, leading to reliability issues with water quality. This was made worse by settlement in the Plenty River's catchment upstream, where farmers polluted its waters, similarly to the Birrarung. Algae outbreaks and pipe failures towards the city meant that while the system was a huge improvement, it was far from a final solution. Due to the open catchment nature of the Plenty River upstream of the Yan Yean Reservoir, it resulted in human feces and other waste still entering the water supply, and it was therefore decided to construct the Turarong Reservoir. This would still impound part of the Plenty River in its upper reaches, but would also bring water south over the Great Dividing Range via the Silver Creek and Wallaby Creek aqueducts, discharging into Jacks Creek, which later joined the upper Plenty River immediately behind the reservoir wall. The creation of Turarong and the diversion of waters from over the Great Dividing Range was largely driven by Melbourne's rapid growth. Between 1851 and 1861, Victoria's population as a whole surged from about 77,000 to over 540,000. Melbourne's share of that growth was substantial, climbing to over 100,000 by 1861, and it would only increase as the century progressed onwards. This growth placed pressure on the water supply, and by 1879, low water levels within Yan Yean prompted the need for a new water source to be identified and explored for use. The action of building Turarong and the associated aqueducts permitted a closed catchment to be put in place, finally separating polluted and disease-ridden waters from Melbourne's general water supply. Planners and engineers quickly learned that while a closed catchment policy largely prevented waterborne disease, the success of the scheme led to yet another problem being quickly realised. Melbourne would need more than one water source. It would need an entire network of reservoirs, catchments, and possibly even treatment plants to keep up with a young and very thirsty city. Yan Yean and Turarong were just the beginning. As Melbourne continued to grow, so did its need for safe, clean, and reliable water, and so planners and engineers alike turned their sights to the Yarra Ranges, where they hoped to locate further sources of unpolluted water from the Upper Birrarung and its tributaries, and also a means to transport and store it for use within that ever-growing city. In the next episode of this series, we explore the ongoing expansion of Melbourne's water supply system and how the Watts River and O'Shanassy River were intercepted and connected to the city of Melbourne to keep up with its insatiable demand, as well as the turning point where key decisions began being made to change the game for the city's water security. I'm Paul Michael Angus. Thanks for watching.